Okay, let's get started. So, as I said before, this presentation is How to Move to Canada, a guide for Americans looking north. And this really stems from a number of conversations I've been having with clients and potential clients about prospects for moving to Canada. So I'm going to quickly go over my bio, my background, so you have it and you know that I know what I'm doing. I've been doing this for 20 years and I love it. It's my passion. Working with cross-border clients, both personal and professional in terms of corporate. Oh, we just had another person join us. So I just wanted to introduce myself. Our law firm is called Ackah Business Immigration Law, and we are based in Calgary, Alberta, but we have locations in Vancouver and Toronto as well. And our goal is to smooth the way to Canada for professionals and their families. I won't go into all the details of my background. You can read it all. But really, knowing that I have a passion for immigration, I've been leading a team for a number of years, and I've worked with companies all over the world, as well as individuals who literally just want to come in and work or have a job or be reunited with their loved ones. So let's get started. I love this quote from Tony Robbins. It is in our moments of decision that your destiny is shaped. And when I think about this, I think about the decisions that go into deciding to enter Canada and deciding to make a change in your life. These are major decisions that have an impact on every aspect of your life. So to do it, you want to make sure you're doing it well and you're doing it with as little stress as possible. So this is going to be the overview of our presentation. We're going to go through some notes on NAFTA, different categories for coming first as a worker, and then moving yourself to permanent residence. We're going to talk about labor market impact assessments, the global talent stream, study permits. The main part of my presentation I'm going to really focus on and highlight is express entry permanent residence. It's a major aspect of immigration in Canada at the moment. The provincial nominee programs will be reviewed briefly, as well as spousal sponsorships and common law and same-sex marriage sponsorships, and family, grandparent, and investor startup. It's a lot to cover before we get to the end, which is Canadian citizenship, and then answering your questions. So let's begin. I'm very excited to have you join us. This is just a little animation that I quite like because it really does express the challenges of moving and getting over that border. And, you know, sometimes people actually lose their sanity. It's just so stressful. And we are here to hopefully make it an easy process that does not cause too much stress, and that you know all along the way what it is you need to be doing. So, why would Americans want to move to Canada? You know, we have a lot of people going the other way, a lot of Canadians crossing the border. But in terms of Americans coming to Canada, what is in it for them? And these are just some notes I have. I really believe that there is a better quality of life depending on where you're coming from. It's all relative. Canada has lots and lots of space, and we need people, that's for sure. And also, we believe there are economic opportunities to moving to Canada. It is a real entrepreneurial country, and I really believe people can do whatever they choose to do when they get to Canada. Some people come to Canada to start a business. Some are sponsored by their Canadian spouse or partner, and others come to school to study, because even as a foreign student, many of the university and college fees are less expensive than in the States. And of course, one of the main reasons people come to Canada is to join their family members. Believe it or not, I get asked a lot about the Canadian healthcare system. This is a real issue for a lot of Americans, is the fact that we have public health care. And whether or not you are working, if you have legal status in Canada, you will also be entitled to to health care after you've been resident for 3 months or more. So before we begin, I always want to talk a little bit about the different terminology, because some of the presentation I will start using some of the terms like EE for express entry, ITA instead of invitation to apply, PR, permanent residence, temporary foreign worker, TFW. Canada Immigration has changed its name in the last couple of years. It used to be Citizenship and Immigration Canada, and now it is Immigration, Refugees, and Citizenship Canada. It's a mouthful. So I hope to be using IRCC, but I may slip because I've been doing this for 20 years, and I may actually still call it CIC. Forgive me in advance. The other one would be the LMIA, Labor Market Impact Assessment. Provincial Nominee Program is a PMP, and ESBC is what used to be Service Canada, and we'll talk about that as well. Okay, so the first angle of the presentation I want to focus on is using NAFTA. Obviously, right now, NAFTA is going through a number of changes. It's in the media every day as Canada, Mexico, and the United States negotiate NAFTA. But for now, what we have is still NAFTA. And so we are still doing applications cross-border every day for Canadians going to the US and Americans coming to Canada. It is the preferred tool to facilitate cross-border movement because it is geared for professionals of the citizenship of Canada, US, and Mexico. It makes the process of crossing the border pretty clear and a little bit easier than the hurdle of some of the other categories that we'll discuss. NAFTA was established in 1994, and its purpose is for temporary entry. So this means that NAFTA allows people to come into Canada as business visitors, professionals, and as intercompany transfers, so that you come in first as a worker, and then you can move to permanent residence from within the country. We'll speak about that first before we move to the direct permanent residence options. So the first thing to talk about is the NAFTA business visitor category. In order to qualify for this, you must be a US or Mexican citizen coming into Canada. A number of people always ask me, what am I allowed to do as a business visitor? And it is really a short-term entry. You can come in for meetings, you can come in for training, for instance, attending a conference, internal corporate training with your company, sales activity, pursuing business development, job interviews, etc. If you're entering the Canada for your US employer, you should always have a travel letter to confirm your duties, because honestly, things are getting harder at the border these days. I'm sure some of the change in politics in the United States has affected this, but on both sides of the border, it seems to be much more rigorous. And so I don't think it's reasonable for an employer to ever send an employee across the border for meetings without a letter confirming what they're doing. You cannot be paid from Canada. So that is one of the main issues with business visitor. You must stay on your home payroll, but you cannot be paid from Canada because that means you're working, and you can't work in this category of business visitor. You must not say the word work, and I say this all the time. It is a four-letter word. It immediately raises the shackles of immigration officers, and they get really, really nervous. And then you'll go into secondary and have lots of questions to answer. So when you come in as a NAFTA business visitor, you must be coming in for those purposes we've outlined: meetings, interviews, training, business development, looking for jobs. Those are all legitimate reasons to come in. NAFTA visitors can stay in Canada for a maximum of 6 months. But of course, we always recommend less, because the question becomes, what are you doing here for that long if you're not working? How are you surviving? You know, are you just being a tourist for 6 months? You really just need to be able to satisfy officers that you have non-immigrant intention when you enter as a business visitor. Okay? Now on to our next slide. This is using NAFTA. This is the professional category. I love this category, and I'm very hopeful and optimistic that this category will continue. once our NAFTA negotiations are finalized, because so many Americans are in Canada under this category, and so many Canadians are in the United States under this category. So all Americans need valid authorization to work in Canada. You have to ask the question when you're, deciding, do I need a work permit? Is a work permit required? And if you're doing work, the answer is always yes. With very few exceptions. If the person is being recruited to work in Canada, they need a work permit. If you need a work permit, then can you rely on a treaty such as NAFTA? Or is there a special immigration program you can rely on? If you can't find one and NAFTA doesn't work for you, maybe you're a green card holder. NAFTA does not work for green card holders. It only applies to citizens of the United States, citizens of Canada, and citizens of Mexico. If not, then you need to get a labor market impact assessment, an LMIA, before you can enter the Canadian workforce. So this is, again, one of my favorite categories, because once the packages are put together properly, professionally, as fulsomely as possible, you are able to apply right at the airport or the border into Canada. It is a 3-year work permit. So if you qualify under one of the professional categories, you can literally be in Canada, and every 3 years it's renewable, so long as you continue to prove that you have no immigrant intention. You must meet educational or experience criteria, and you must be working in the field of the profession. And one of the main things is you must have a job offer or a contract. So NAFTA has a list of 66 plus professions, such as engineer, geoscientist, technician, technologist, for those economist, computer systems analyst, accountant, lawyer, teacher, architect. These are some of the 66 titles that are considered in the NAFTA professional category. It's very long, but however, I would say it has not been updated since NAFTA negotiations. They had some more negotiations maybe about 10 years ago, and they added a couple more titles, but it hasn't been updated to really reflect the new economy, the gig economy. A lot of those titles are not in the NAFTA professional. The people who have eligibility for this must have a degree to be able to qualify. And unfortunately, titles like manager, director, or president, these are not eligible position titles under NAFTA. So even if you are a president of a company, you have to go behind the title to look at what is the degree that is required. And as lawyers, we would focus on that degree requirement to choose the NAFTA category that would work for you. So again, to qualify, you must be coming in to do work, and you must possess all the credentials. You must have a bachelor's degree. Almost every single category under the NAFTA professional listing requires a bachelor's degree or higher. That is a minimum. The only exceptions to the bachelor's degree are management consultant, scientific technician technologist, technical publications writer, and medical laboratory technologist. These are the only areas where you have exceptions. And so, for instance, a management consultant, which we'll talk about later as well, you can have 5 years or more experience in your field and still qualify if you can satisfy immigration that you are a subject matter expert and you've been consulting and working in this specific field, even though you don't have the degree. For the technician technologist stream, I'll quickly tell you about that. You must have a diploma, and you must be working with a degreed professional, like an engineer. So the material you present at the airport or the border has to include that person you'll be working in collaboration with and their credentials. But for most reasons and purposes, NAFTA professional category requires a bachelor's degree. And this is how it's defined. It's usually a 3-year or 4-year degree program. And you get a degree at the end of it that you can present. And when you go to the airport to make your applications, they want to see your actual degree. The definition of post-secondary diploma or certificate is usually a completion of 2 years or more of post-secondary education, and that you are leaving with an actual diploma or certificate in hand, as well as perhaps a transcript that shows that you were in school for at least 2 years, and some of the coursework. I would recommend that as well. One thing that a lot of people are surprised by is that in order to get your Canadian work permit, you don't need to meet licensing or association requirements. That's a totally different issue. So for instance, a NAFTA engineer coming to Canada, They just need to have their degree and a job offer and be able to show that they're doing all the work. However, they don't need to yet be a member of the Professional Engineers Association in the province in Canada. That can come later. They may not be able to sign some of their reports as PNG because they're not yet qualified in Canada, but they can still get their Canadian work permit by virtue of having a degree. One thing that's really important to our clients, of course, is what happens with your accompanying dependents. So for accompanying dependent family members, what's wonderful about the NAFTA professional category is that spouses are eligible to work. They're eligible for an open spousal work permit. And this is very different from the United States because the TN visa, which is the equivalent in the US, spouses get a TD visa and they cannot work. So it's very limiting unless they're able to qualify on their own merit. But in Canada, we obtain spousal work permits, and you can be married, you can be common law, you can even be same-sex partners, which is fabulous here in Canada. You just need to provide a marriage certificate and birth certificates of accompanying family members. If you're not married, we need proof that you have been cohabiting for at least 1 year to qualify for the common law category. Children can attend school as dependents as well when you come in under the NAFTA professional category. So for instance, if you're able to find a job in Canada working as a teacher, you can bring your family with you. So long as everybody is under 22, the children can also come to Canada as a part of the family unit. And then after about 3 months of residency, you'll all be able to obtain provincial medical coverage and be eligible for provincial health care, which is a huge advantage. As I mentioned before, one of the few categories where you can come in without obtaining a bachelor's degree is the NAFTA management consultant category. In this one, you either have the bachelor's degree, licentiatura degree, or 5 years experience in a related field. And so we do this very regularly. Management consultants, they provide services which are improving the economic performance of a company, giving advice, analyzing, strategic direction, all of that arm's length support. And they usually have to be billing the client, you know, and they're contractors, essentially. They cannot look like employees. But this is a fabulous way to come to Canada because the management consultant can actually stay in Canada full-time while they're doing consulting work, or they can come and go every week if they want, depending on the nature of their project in Canada. And this is one of the ones where I would say it gets misused the most because everybody who doesn't fit into the normal professional category of titled positions tries to fit into this. So sometimes they get more scrutiny and they are harder to do. And we highly recommend you working with a professional because you need to really go above and beyond to qualify. One of the other categories that I work with regularly is the NAFTA intercompany transfer. This is a category for employees at the executive or managerial level who have specialized knowledge And you must have worked for the company in the US, let's say, for at least 12 months in the preceding 3 years before you can transfer to Canada. You must prove that there is a proper corporate affiliation and that the companies are related. What's really great about this is once you qualify under this category, you can transfer people to Canada to work for your related entity in Canada. Initially, you'll get a 2 or 3 year work permit at the airport, and it's renewable. So for the specialized knowledge category, it's a 5-year term. And for the managerial executive, it's a 7-year term in total. And hopefully, of course, you would have obtained permanent resident status well before this date, before you expire and you cap out. You want to move on to that as quickly as possible so that you can secure your life in Canada and so that if anything happens with your employer, you can still remain in Canada. I'm going to review the 3 different categories now. So executives, this is a listing of what you need to be doing in order to qualify for executive, which is equivalent to the L1A visa in the United States. You must be directing or managing the organization in a high level, establishing goals, policies, etc., and having wide latitude, hiring, firing, growing, acquiring, and lots of decision making. And generally, you have responsibility for profit and loss. So we include all of that when we do our letters of support to show the real executive nature of the role. Generally, high-level executives don't have very much supervision, and maybe just from the CEO level. So the things about who they report to is also important. A manager. So one of the a manager also fits into the L1A equivalent in the U.S. This is the category under Canadian work permit where they manage the organization. Their title might say project manager, department manager. They have authority as well to hire and fire, but they likely respond or report to the executive above them. But they still function at a high level. Maybe they run a department or a division. And so proving that they're coming from a managerial type role from the US and they are entering a managerial type role in Canada, and they still have discretion. In order to get the work permit, you need to prove all of these elements. Something that was added to NAFTA and kind of the manual for the officers at the border on both sides is this functional manager. This was added a few years back because we recognized that there were managers out there, but not all of them were at the same level. And so, for instance, you could be a manager and not actually manage any staff. And so we created this functional manager category because this role is quite significant. They provide, great important service to the company, but they might not just manage people. They might have a whole big job on their own, and this would be the kind of application we would do for somebody in that role. So a supervisor at the first line is not necessarily considered acting in a managerial capacity. You need to be an indispensable function of the organization. And then the specialized knowledge worker. So this is for people who don't manage, but maybe they have some unique experience, some unique information that they bring to the organization. A lot of times, our highly technical employees fit into this category. And so for that alone, we want people who we can show have this expertise. And sometimes we have to do above and beyond to show that this is not just somebody who can come off the street and do the role. Having worked for the US company for at least 1 year in a highly technical or specialized knowledge role makes them the ideal person to come over to Canada and transfer in to bring this knowledge and expertise and share it with the Canadian marketplace and with the Canadian organization. So there is a lot of scrutiny to this category. Again, it's equivalent to the L1B. But because you're American, we do this at the airport, and it would be my job or the job of your legal counsel to highlight what is so specialized, whether it's proprietary information or technology, whether it is something that is unique to your organization, something that has been developed by this person. Our role is to distinguish them from just literally a brand new hire off the street. Because the question you'll probably get at the airport is, why can't a Canadian do this? So we answer that question in the material that we present. And we talk about the significance. One little note with the specialized knowledge category to keep in mind is that this is the one category in Canadian immigration where the officers, you have to satisfy them that you're paying at a high level, which would be prevailing wage in Canada. You have to at least be paying what you would pay a Canadian to do this. Because in the past, certain companies would come into Canada and bring their highly technical people, sometimes from India or China, but they would not be paying them what they would be paying them in Canada. And so the government has come down on this and said, you must satisfy us. You're paying at the very minimum what a Canadian would be paid to ensure that people were not being taken advantage of in Canada. Okay? So I just love this little picture. We're going to talk about labor market impact assessments next, but immigration sometimes feels like this. I like you not, I like you. You have to do so much to satisfy the officers at the airport. They have considerable discretion. So we don't ever take the entry to Canada as a light, casual thing. You must always treat it as significant and be prepared and make sure you've got the right people preparing you. So once we move out of NAFTA and you don't qualify, but you want to be in Canada and you're lucky enough to have found a job, often people say, well, how can I find a job in Canada? I'm in the US. You will be surprised how many people go online at the job bank. They look at Canadian job boards, monster.ca, jobs.ca, as I said, Job Bank, all of the same ones in the States, even Kijiji, Indeed, LinkedIn, they all have people in Canada. They're looking. And sometimes their searches are global, their searches are North America wide, and they're open to Americans applying. So once you do, meet the requirements and you get a job offer, but let's say you are not a citizen yet, you're a green card holder. We can't rely on NAFTA. So that means the only way to get your work permit is to move you by way of a labor market impact assessment. This is similar to the labor certification process in the US, but basically we have to advertise your role. So if your employer to be, your prospective employer, has not advertised in a way that meets ESDC, which is our Service Canada or our Labor Department's requirements, which are very specific, then you must still advertise. They must still advertise for 4 weeks minimum. Once they do the 4 weeks of advertising and they see who applies, they have to go through the interview process for anybody that looks on paper that they would qualify for the job. Then if they can discount them and say, well, no, they still don't have the experience that we need, or we can't find the right person and you are still the ideal candidate, then they're able to move through the LMIA process. Advertising is essential, and your legal counsel will be able to help you to know where to advertise. The minimum is 3 places, including Job Bank. In our firm, we generally recommend 4 to 5, because occasionally some of them will fall off before the 1 month, or maybe Service Canada won't accept one of the ads. So we never leave it to just the minimum. Otherwise, your employer has lost a month, and they have to restart the ads to qualify. So if you are on an LMIA, and you can then, if you get approved, you can immediately apply at the airport for your work permit with a package, providing the LMIA confirmation certificate. It's a number that will be in the system. They will know you are already being approved. It's like a pre-approval, so that when you get to the airport, you know things will be smooth. And assuming there's no criminality and no medical inadmissibility issues, you will obtain your work permit right at the airport. Generally, it's for 2 years. The value of the LMIA for some people too is that it allows you to consider applying for permanent residence. So as you recall, I talked about how you can come in first as a worker, which is a temporary status, and then you can flip your intention and change to somebody who wants to apply for permanent residence. So then you rely on those points. 50 points will be given to you towards your Express Entry portal profile if you are in a managerial type job or skilled position. You will be eligible for 200 points for Express Entry if you're in an executive role. So thinking about how the LMIA is structured and what the job description is that you post for is very important, because it'll definitely impact you later on. If you need the points, you need to make sure you're choosing the right job classification. All right, and I also recommend always start early, do not wait. Sometimes things take longer than you think, and then you get stuck. One of the changes we've had, it was launched, I believe, last year. It's a pilot project. It's called it's called the Global Talent Stream, and this is a form of LMIA. However, it is aimed at high-tech businesses. We really want to attract highly skilled global talent. And some of our clients and corporations in Canada here are really struggling to find that, because we are a small population. We're under 40 million people in Canada, and sometimes you can't find what you need. And so we're looking for ways to track those people and bring them to Canada. So I believe it'll probably be extended. The value of this global talent stream is it expedites the LMIA process. So instead of it being a process that could take 3 or 4 months before your employee can come to Canada, it could be a matter of 2 to 3 weeks, because they recognize the importance of bringing in a highly skilled person. Okay. So there are 2 categories in order to qualify for the Global Talent Stream. One of them is if you're working with a designated referral partner. So there's a long list on the Citizenship and Immigration website, IRCC website, where they list their partners, and most of these partners are in the high-tech industry. So these would be jobs like data, data mining, cloud consultant. There would be positions like high-tech software engineer, digital media engineer, high-tech positions that we are desperately looking for in our markets across the country. So companies or organizations like Mars Discovery District in Toronto, Invest Ottawa, Then Innovation, they have been designated by the Canadian government as partners that are able to really vet the prospects of the company that is looking to partner with them to bring in these people. But if you don't have that relationship, and some of our clients don't, there is a detailed occupational list of positions. And this list of positions, as long as it has your title that you want, generally speaking, and you're paying generally $80,000 or the prevailing wage, because they want it to be a high-paying position showing that there is a need for those people, you would qualify for the Global Talent Stream. And we could talk more about that. If any of you have questions later, you can call me as well after this or email me. But I want to move on so we can get to the real meat and potatoes of this. So study permits. Sometimes people call me and they don't have the points for express entry. It's crazy, but as you hit 40, you actually lose points. You don't get any points for that, and we'll talk about this later. But then they're looking for how else to come. Let's say you don't have a job offer, but you wanted to come as a permanent resident. One thing I started suggesting to people regularly is to consider going to school. And I know we don't all want to go to school. Those of us who are over 40, it's not always easy. But I recommend this because it allows you, once you're admitted to a designated learning institution, to attend school in Canada. And from that process, you can work while you're in school part-time and then full-time when you're on break from school. But the benefit of this, whether you are 40 or 80, honestly, if you get into the school program, is you can then get a postgraduate work permit. And this allows you to gain Canadian experience, and you get points for going to school in Canada as well as working in Canada for at least 1 year in a field related to your studies. And from then, you can look to express entry or perhaps a provincial nominee program. So there are a number of different ways to become a permanent resident, and they don't all have to be direct. They can be circular. You can find a way that might take a little longer, but it gets you to the end goal. And sometimes that is the best way for certain people. Here I just talk more about how you get extra points for express entry, as I mentioned, under the express entry process for permanent residents. So think about it as an option. As I said, school is cheaper here in Canada than it is in the States, even when you're paying foreign fees. Just having some water, lots of talking. The next one is express entry, PR. And I love this too. I always like to find some cute little cartoons. Under the new immigration rules, I'll need to see your visa or MasterCard, Amex, or Discovery card. That's not true. We don't charge, but it is a process that takes an investment of time and money and resources, and you want to make sure you're working with people who know what they're doing, because your life is on the line. You don't want to find that you wasted a year and you're still not a permanent resident. So I'm going to spend more time in this presentation talking about express entry permanent residents, because this is the newest way. Since 2015, they launched this. We've rejigged our entire permanent residence process to fit into express entry. So I'm going to give you that whole launch of it, overview of it, talk about how it works, what to do, how to increase your points to give you the best possible chance, and what you need to know, so that if you qualify, you can literally become a permanent resident in less than 12 months. So the way that this was launched by the Canadian government was, it was supposed to be easy and it was supposed to be all online, and the government chooses you. In the old days, you basically decided, okay, I've been here for a year or two. I've got Canadian work experience as a foreign worker in Canada. I am choosing to apply, and that's it. And so long as you met all the requirements, you would qualify and get your PR. This process now takes the control out of your hands indirectly and gives them to the government, because the government selects its ideal immigrants. So this is why sometimes if you're not of the right age or you don't have enough work experience, you may not qualify. So we're going to go through this again, as I said, for the express entry overview. These are the classes under express entry: Federal Skilled Worker, FSW, Canadian Experience Class, those who have at least 12 months of full-time work experience in Canada already, federal skilled trades, and provincial nominee programs. The benefits of permanent residence to Canada is you will obtain healthcare coverage. You can work anywhere. So this means you no longer need to be tied to your employer that brought you to Canada or that gave you the job. You can now work for anybody you want, anywhere across the country. You could go to school as a permanent resident and pay the local fees that Canadians and permanent residents pay. You won't be paying foreign fees, and you can travel anywhere you want. You just can't vote, run for office, or hold some jobs with high security clearance. But other than that, you essentially have all the same status. So this is how permanent residence works, the federal skilled worker category. There is a 67-point threshold when it's under the federal skilled worker category. So let's talk about that. That means even before they start looking at the larger number of points that you need, usually it's around 445 and up out of 1,200, you still have to qualify first, and it's based on age, which is where some people really lose right away, because if they don't meet that 67-point threshold minimum because of their age, they can't move on to the next step to see if they get the extra, if they get extra points. So that is a challenge. So there's age, education, work experience, proof of funds, language ability, how you do, for instance, on the IELTS test, which is the International English Language Test you have to take, or there's a French equivalent. If you don't get at least 67 at that entry point, and honestly, even people who have PhDs sometimes don't meet this threshold only because they might be 50 years old. I know it's not fair, and honestly, I think I need to write an article about it, and it's on my to-do list, and maybe write to the minister, because it just seems to really discriminate against people with wonderful experience. So if you don't get that 67 points, you can't even move down to the next step, which would be to set up your portal and see how many points you would get for the next stage for selection to be invited to become a permanent resident. If that's the case and you don't get that 67 points, then we move you on into the new category. And we might look for something else under a provincial nominee program, or say get a job, come in as a worker, come in as a labor market impact holder, to get your points up, to find a different way to get to PR. It doesn't mean that there's no way. Even school, we would talk about all the options to increase that option for you. Okay, so let's see, for those of you who qualify, there is another category called Canadian Experience Class. This is a category for all skilled occupations that are eligible, so long as you have a minimum of 12 months of work experience in Canada. And so the NOC codes, which are called National Occupation Classification, NOC codes, management is coded as 0. So that was like executive. People in that category generally would get the 200 points. Depending on how they came to Canada. The professional category would be A, and or B, it would be technical skilled trades. So you want to put yourself into O, A, or B. Those are the only job classifications that allow you to qualify under the express entry process. So another thing that has been developed since the launch of express entry is that people are also being selected by provinces. So when you put yourself into this portal, and I'm going to show you the diagram to make it all clear in a few minutes, is the provinces can also choose their ideal immigrants. So the province, let's say Alberta, where I am, Alberta can say, oh, we see some great candidates that are sitting in the portal, and we want to offer them permanent residence to live in Alberta. And maybe you're already here working, so it's a really it's an easy transition. The province will select you and offer you PMP PR, and the value of this is you get an extra 600 points, and that basically guarantees that you will be invited to apply, and definitely guarantees permanent residence, again, with the caveat, assuming there's no criminality that makes you inadmissible or major health issues that makes you inadmissible. Other than that, you will definitely qualify so long as you provide all the information that's needed. And the last category for express entry really is through labor market impact assessment. This is what I was speaking about before, how you can get extra points towards your, let's say, federal skilled worker or Canadian experience class. If you're already here working, you can get 50 to 200 points, which takes you over the top if you need it to become eligible to be invited to apply for permanent residence. So this link will take you And I'll be sharing the slides after this presentation. As well, after the presentation, everybody that we have signed up for, we have about 70 people, I believe, who signed up, will be eligible to get our ebook, which also talks about the need for immigration, and will give you more information. If you log on to this link, it takes you to the government website where you can try to see what your estimated points will be. What we do here at Ackah Business Immigration Law is, before we would accept anybody as a new client for express entry, we want to know for sure they have a very strong chance of success. So we do a 1-hour consultation where you pay for that so that we can do your assessment, and using our expertise and what we consider eligible points in education, so that we know up front if you're going to have 480 points, we know you're going to be a strong file and you'll be selected within a matter of 2 to 4 weeks. So we will go forward with that, and you won't lose that money for the consult. It goes towards the cost of the application. So this is how Express Entry works. You have to upload to their portal a whole bunch of documents, and I'm just going to go to the image here. This is better. So this image really shows you the different steps. So first step, you create your profile. So basically, this is how you do it. We create a profile for you, we register you, and we try to determine where we think you'll fit. If you're going to be federal skilled worker because you're not yet in Canada, or you haven't worked for 12 months in Canada to qualify for Canadian Experience class, this is what we do. We set up the portal first, and we have to put in details about your education, your skills, your work experience, your language ability. So you need to already have your education assessed by 𝒂𝒄𝒏𝒕. 𝒂𝒄𝒏 is the assessment company that the government prefers, and they'll say, great, your degree in the US qualifies the same as a degree in Canada. Because some people are coming from other countries when they do express entry, and so it's not always directly clear if their education meets the same standards. So then candidates will determine which of the categories they want to qualify for: federal skilled worker, CEC, Canadian Experience class, or an area I haven't spoken too much about, federal skilled trades. And those are trade positions, which we need as well desperately in Canada for those that qualify. If you don't have a job, we also need to register you for the job bank. So that's where that arrow goes to. If you're not working in Canada already, you put yourself into the job bank, and you also may be eligible for employers to select you and give you a job offer, which will give you more points. So everything is about maximizing your points, okay? Then you go to the express entry pool. Once you've been accepted into the pool because you've provided all your essential information, you go sit in this pool with thousands of other people around the world waiting. And every 2 to 3 weeks, the federal government will say, this is the cutoff this week. So lately, it's come down to even 440, 442 points out of 1,200. So if you have 475 points, you know you will be getting an invitation to apply. And then you have 60 days to get everything else you need in, because there's no way to extend that deadline. So as lawyers, we always already start that process at step 1. We don't want you to be scrambling at the last stage to get reference letters from employers and do medicals and all those other things. And then you'll be invited to apply, and then the government portal allows you to upload everything to them. So these are some of the documents you need. So for us, we always start early. Get your birth certificates, adoption, marriage, divorce certificates, school transcripts, copies of degrees, certificates and licenses. Letters of reference from former employers are very important. Or if you can't get them, then we include things like pay stubs and tax papers. And then generally what we do is we do a statutory declaration for any employer that you're relying on as a part of your years of experience that give you the points. You need to be able to explain that the company's gone under, or nobody there remembers me and they don't have records anymore, but these are the papers I have proving I was working there, pay stubs, your tax forms showing the name of the company, et cetera, et cetera. Maybe the company's been acquired. I think a statutory declaration is essential because you basically need to swear to the government that what you've indicated as your points assessment is true. And the only way to do this is to give them something formal and legal. And then also you have to provide all your addresses and travel details since you are 18, and police certificates. Police certificates are the hardest, depending if you've traveled a lot. Any place you've lived for more than 6 months, since the age of 18, you need to get a police certificate for. So this is why we start earlier, okay? Very, very important. let me move to the next slide. So as I said, once your profile has been submitted, you're entered into the pool and you just have to wait. Just wait and wait to be selected. Generally, the cutoff, as I said, has been 442 points. 440 has been the least amount. When Express Entry started, it started where they only gave you 60 days to complete the PR application for submission. Again, there are no exceptions. Then the government changed it a year or two in to now giving us 90 days. And we all breathed a sigh of relief. We were all just like, ah, fabulous. Because sometimes getting some of these papers and reference letters and police certificates were taking a real toll. But just recently, unfortunately, they turned it back. They turned the clock back, and now it's back to 60 days. So which makes the importance of working with a professional even more important. Getting all your documents in is essential. If anything is missing when you are invited to apply and you don't upload everything in a format that the government can read and access, everything has to be in English and French or French, they will turn it out back. They will pop you out of the portal and rescind your ITA. Also, if they find that you have misrepresented in any way, they will cancel your invitation to apply, and you're back to the drawing board. So it's essential that you do things accurately and truthfully as quickly as possible. The Express Entry profile is valid for 1 year. So once you set up your profile and you don't get selected, maybe you have 430 points. It's never gone that low. As I said, we generally wouldn't do it unless we know that within a year you're going to gain extra points because you're working here already. That's a good strategy. Get the portal going. Maybe you're a few months away from hitting your 12 months, and you know you're going to get more points. Or something else, maybe you're going to get an LMIA from your employer to work an extra period of time that's going to give you extra 50 points. That's the only reason I would say do the portal. It's never gone down below 440, so I really don't think it makes sense unless you know you have a plan in place to increase your points. And we'll talk about different ways of doing that later, how we can maximize your points. So after 12 months, it basically disappears, and you have to redo the portal again if you've not been invited to apply. All right? This is another visual of the Express Entry process and how it all works. Foreign nationals and potential candidates, Americans, let's say, sitting here, you're economic immigrants waiting to be invited to apply. Once you're in the pool above, then you're able to move through the process, and the candidates that meet the criteria are invited into the pool. So as I said, the provinces and territories will also be eligible to offer you an invitation to apply and select you with the provincial nomination, which gives you 600 points. You can also promote yourselves to potential employers in Canada by way of the job bank. So this is great because it can match your experience with an employer looking for somebody like you. So highly, highly recommend that everybody who starts the portal immediately goes in and also accesses the job boards and things like that through Job Match on the job bank. Okay, this is what it looks like. Move on to the next quickly. I don't want to take up all your time for questions as well. So if the candidate does not have a valid job offer with an LMIA or a nomination from a province, they have to just wait to be selected based on what the number that the government selects is the cutoff. And as I said, you should register with the job bank to help you with the job matching. If you don't submit your profile to the job match within 60 days for the job bank, your profile will expire. I know these visuals are a lot, but the reason I'm giving them to you because it really kind of helps bring down the issues from very high level to just a real visual. So you can look at this later in your own time. One of the things to consider is IRCC defines a dependent child as one under 22 that is unmarried. Up until about a year and a half ago, it was 19 and under, which caused a lot of havoc. The previous government had reduced it from under 22. It's gone back up with the current government, thank goodness, because it meant that some people's children were aging out, and that meant that they wouldn't be eligible for permanent residence at the same time as their parents, or they would be excluded from the application because they had hit that cutoff, let's say of 23, they're here going to school maybe while you're working as a temporary foreign worker, your child would not have been included. So it's really, really devastating for families if this happens. you must keep in mind that an application for express entry is not locked in until the ITA has been received and the application submitted and accepted. It gets to a place, the EAPR stage, where the government has reviewed everything, they send a letter or an email to you letting you know they've gone through all the steps, and now it's just a matter of time. Then you can breathe a sigh of relief because you know that your dependent child would be included. But until then, you have to be certain that they are under 22. IRCC has posted on their website, this is something that I just want to raise with you, that potential candidates for express entry are not required to hire an immigration representative or lawyer to help them. And this is it's true. I mean, you don't need to use a lawyer or a consultant, an immigration consultant, but I have to tell you that when they first launched express entry, of the first 9,000 applications, 6,000 were returned as incomplete or incorrect. And that percentage has not gone down significantly. Those who are not working with people who know this portal in and out with their eyes closed, know exactly what needs to happen, they risk a high percentage of rejected forms and documents, and they have to start over. So for me, it's a matter of don't waste your time to save some money. Get it done right so you can get here as a permanent resident and start living the dream that you have to be in Canada. That's just my plug, and it's not for me even, but it's for any professional immigration consultant or lawyer in Canada. Make sure you find somebody who knows what they're doing so that you can move through this process quickly. So I'm all excited. I'm sure I'm the only one excited during this presentation now. I'm on slide 53, so I don't know if you're still with me, but thank you for hanging on. I'm going to talk now a little bit about the Provincial Nominee Program. This is a wonderful program that over the years has evolved. Every province almost in Canada has a PMP. And the value of this is if you don't qualify for express entry because you're too old or you don't have the requisite qualifications, you may be eligible to qualify for PMP. So for instance, let's say you are working here in a lower skilled position, maybe retail, or you become a supervisor in a retail establishment. You won't necessarily qualify for express entry, but you may qualify for a provincial nominee program because they have a cutoff that's a little lower, and the requirements for language are lower. And so you can move through that process where if you have an employer in that province, they basically help you apply for PMP. And that brings your whole family along with you. The only thing about the Provincial Nominee Program that I'm not a big fan of is sometimes it just takes longer because you have to qualify first for Provincial Nominee. And then once you've been given that nomination, and you can use that nomination to then apply federally for all your other federal forms for permanent residence. So instead of it being 8 to 12 months, it ends up being 2 to 3 years. And that whole time, you must qualify to be in Canada. You cannot generally apply for a provincial nominee program if you're not in Canada, except for a few exceptions, and we'll talk about them. These would be the provincial immigration programs. So although it sounds the same, they are different because some provinces in Canada have their own programs: Alberta, Quebec, Manitoba, Saskatchewan, and the Atlantic provinces. This is where the province has a program where they accept expressions of interest from people who are not working in Canada already. So for instance, if you're a farmer in Mexico with lots of experience and Saskatchewan needs a farmer with this level of experience, or you want to invest in a farm in Saskatchewan province, for instance, you may be eligible to be invited to apply to become an immigrant in Canada under that category and live in that province and do that work. Alternatively, they may need some certain skill sets. So I think there was a time that one of the provinces was desperate for accountants and financial people. And so they listed them on their list of occupations for people. And so for instance, if you're coming from India, you could qualify for that so long as there was space. These programs are very popular, as you can imagine, because they always cap out every year. And the processing takes time, but it's one way too for Americans to come to Canada who may not fit into the other programs that I've discussed already. Just keep it in mind. One of the things we do regularly, obviously, is the spousal common law sponsorship. This is for people who have married a foreigner. You traveled the world, you've fallen in love, and you've married a person from another country, and you want to bring them, of course, to be with you, and you want to be reunited. So there are two different ways to do this. And this applies to same-sex relationships as well as common law, so long as you can satisfy the requirements for common law, which means having shared address, bills, banking, maybe you're on each other's health benefits or insurance or tax. Well, and then you sign a statutory declaration or a notarized document that says you are common law. You can apply to become a sponsor and to sponsor your partner from either inside Canada or outside Canada, depending on where you are. So let's say you married a Canadian and you can come as an American into Canada as a visitor. That's the intention when you enter. I'm coming as a visitor. You're not coming in to say, I'm coming to be with my husband, because obviously then that intention is permanent. So again, using a professional to help you negotiate how to enter, what to say, what to bring. You don't bring your whole life with you and say you're coming as a visitor. We can strategize those things and help you make sure you get into Canada successfully. Once you're here, your partner can then submit an application for sponsorship for you. And the benefit of doing it from within the country, and especially since Americans don't need visas, you don't even need ETAs, electronic travel authorizations. Every other country, citizenship requires an ETA now to come to Canada, except for the United States. So if your partner's here and you submit the application, you can include a work permit application along with that spousal sponsorship. And the value of this is within 4 to 5 months, you will at least, once the sponsor is approved as a sponsor, and while the permanent residence is in process, you will be eligible to get a work permit. And what's great about this work permit is that it's an open spousal work permit. It allows you to work for wherever you want, whoever you want, however you want, essentially. So that means that while you're waiting for your permanent residence to be finished, which sometimes takes 18 months, you'll be working. This used to cause a lot of challenges for spouses because they had a spouse sitting in the country for a year or sometimes 2 years without benefits, which you'll get when you have the open spousal work permit, and without the ability to work. Lots of strain and lots of pressure. So the government changed it, and we love this change they've made a few years back. Another way to come to Canada is by way of the family sponsorship stream, and this is for permanent residents and Canadians who want to sponsor their family members. And generally it's for children, accompanying children, or parents and grandparents to join them. It's challenging to bring extended family like aunts and uncles and brothers and sisters unless you meet certain criteria. For instance, there's no one else left for you to sponsor that's eligible. You may be able to sponsor one person under this. But for the most part, it's children coming, spouses, parents, and grandparents. And they're limited numbers. So you need to make sure before you start, you know for sure if you qualify. The parent and grandparent program, it's called the Super Visa program. This is a really great program the government launched. And again, Americans can use this. So if you're a grandparent and you have your children or your grandkids living in Canada and you want to spend more time with them, you can enter Canada under this category, so long as you can show that you've got independent health insurance and your child in Canada completes all the relevant forms, you can get a super visa for up to 2 years, and it's renewable. I've heard of people being here for 6, 8 years at this point, maybe waiting for the full sponsorship where your children will be able to sponsor you. But in the meantime, you can be here helping out. It really makes a difference to families, and I think the government recognized the importance of extended family. If you have a child that comes to school here, stays here, becomes an immigrant here, and they have children, and they don't have any other family, this allows your grandkids to have family, to get to know you, and to be together and reunited. And honestly, from an economic perspective, it also allows for that child maybe to get some extra child care support from the grandparent or the parent. So it's a win-win, and it helps the economy. And that's why the government introduced it probably about 5 to 6 years ago. People sometimes call me and asking, how can I come to Canada? I want to invest in a business. What do I need to do? And there are different programs that are focused on attracting investors, entrepreneurs, and self-employed people to come to Canada and grow their business. There are very specific requirements, and so there isn't one size fits all. You need to really determine if you're going to go to a certain province, how much money you're going to invest, Are you going to run the business, or are you just going to create jobs for people? Does this fit in line with your background as a professional from the U.S.? Is it in line with what you've definitely done before? So there are a lot of questions. And so I would definitely recommend you don't start this, either the investor or the startup or the self-employed category, unless you've engaged counsel. It is that complicated, and we don't want you to be disappointed because you get refused. So let's make sure first, before you start, that you meet all the elements before you begin. And lastly, the goal for some people don't want to be just permanent residents. They want to be able to vote. And so in order to become a Canadian citizen, you have to have lived in Canada legally as a permanent resident for 1,095 days. That's 3 years. And then you have to consider all the time you leave in and out of the country. So 3 years you've been in Canada. Some of the time you've worked as a foreign worker can be used. So that means you actually may be eligible for citizenship maybe in 2.5 years of becoming a PR, or 2 years as opposed to 3. You have to have filed your taxes. This is an element that was put in place by the last government. You have to be able to prove you weren't just here working, weren't just here as a permanent resident not paying taxes. You must have filed your taxes, and you must be able to prove your ability to speak English or French. Because of course, to be a citizen of Canada comes with obligations, just like anywhere else in the world. There's also a citizenship test that must be taken. Unless you're over 54, where you get a pass, lucky you have to do the test, and you're granted citizenship. And there's a book that they give you. You have lots of time to prepare. Many countries allow for dual citizenship, like Canada, and the United States does. In their way, they don't actually recognize Canada, but they allow you to have Canadian citizenship. So you don't lose it, but it means that, when you travel to the United States, you use your U.S. passport to come in. And when you travel to Canada, once you become a citizen, you use your Canadian passport. So that's how the dual will work. I hope this has been useful. We're winding down. I just want to quickly summarize that immigration in Canada is just as complicated as it is in the United States. Lots of changes all the time. Constant change is the new normal, and there are significant discretion with officers. Because Americans can be processed at the border for their work permits upon entry, there's a lot of discretion, and you must be prepped. Make sure you're working with somebody who knows what they're doing, because it's always harder to fix a refusal than to get it right the first time. When I get the call when you're stuck at the airport because you've said something wrong or done something wrong, it's so much harder to correct because you're now on the system, okay? We can help you get over the hurdle of moving to Canada quickly and effectively. Save yourself the stress and do it right the first time. This is just a quick overview of ACCA Business Immigration Law and the services we provide. And lastly, I'm here to answer any questions you have. So I'm going to see if I can, if anybody wants to answer any questions or ask any questions before we wrap up. I'm going to unmute everybody, and hopefully I will be able to unmute everybody. There we go. There you go. And there you go. And there you go. And so anybody have questions that they'd like me to answer before we wrap up? If you do, please give me your name. Otherwise, we'll be wrapping up shortly. Hello? Okay, I don't get any questions right now, I don't think. And the other thing I wanted to just remind you is we will be sending around our ebook that's based on this presentation as well as the slides. So if you have any questions at all after you've read the ebook or after this. Oh, Louise, I see your hand. Let me see if I can. Go ahead, Louise.
Can you hear me now, Evelyn?
Yes, yes.
Oh, great. I had myself muted somehow. I just wanted to thank you so much that there's so much to digest here. And I really
know. I'm sorry. It's so much. So fast.
No, it's really fabulous. And that we'll get a copy so that I can kind of think through what may be approached and then contacting your firm. This was tremendous.
Oh, thank you so much for the feedback, Louise. I really appreciate it. Anything at all, you just call us and we'll be able to help and talk you through, okay? Thank you, guys. So okay, is there anyone else I can help before we move on? I don't see any more hands up. So this means I'm going to wrap it up. Feel free to reach out to us. You can reach us at contact@ackalaw.com, and somebody will get back in touch with you immediately. We have a very fast response time, and our goal is to make it as simple as possible to move to the north. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day, everybody. Bye-bye. Oh, hello. Is there a question?
Oh, hello, hi. Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, who's this?
Great. My name is James T. Smith.
Great. Hello, James.
Great. Awesome. The question I had, the presentation was wonderful. Great. My question I want to ask is that, what if you have money and you want to buy a home in Alberta or BC, and you have the money to do it? Can we just buy the home and move out there, or do we have to go through the same process?
No, you can buy a home. Just like in Canada, we have a lot of snowbirds who have homes in Florida and Palm Springs and Arizona, but they don't get status. So the issue becomes, do you want to be here full time, James, or do you just want to have it as like say a place in Whistler where you come for a few months of the year? Do you want to be here?
Yeah, we want to move from Utah and move to Canada and stay there. Right.
Okay, so if that's the case, you still have to deal with immigration. Having purchased a house doesn't mean you become a permanent resident. So you and I need to talk, because I hate when people buy houses and then they call me after the fact. So before you buy, we want to see if there's a way wherever maybe you're working for a company that might be able to transfer you. Maybe you can find a job in Canada under NAFTA Professional. We'll figure out what's the best strategy. Maybe you'll qualify as an immigrant right now and have the necessary points so you can bring yourself in. And if that's the case, then you can come in as a permanent resident. But please don't buy thinking that it gives you anything guaranteed on immigration. Two different things. Okay?
Okay. And then also, what if you're a professional athlete, like track and field? We still have to do
professional athlete?
Right.
Well, I mean, we do cross-border stuff for professional athletes, but generally they're working for a team. So would you be coming to work for a team, a professional team in Canada?
Well, instead of running for America, I guess I'd be running for Canada.
Yeah, but you can't run for Canada until you're a Canadian citizen. Okay, so we got lots to talk about. So I mean, for instance, I move hockey players cross-border. I move, basketball players if they come in professionally. So for instance, if you were engaged by a team in Canada, then you would have a work permit already. Or if you were hired on by a track team or whatever in Canada to work, then I could get you a work permit, and then buying the house makes sense. But until we can secure your status, we can't just come on up, because you're a visitor until you have a document that says you're not a visitor. Okay?
Oh, okay. And then, because I work for a company right now, Lowe's Home Improvement, and I asked.
Yeah,
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, if they transfer you, we can get you a work permit, perhaps, depending on the job. But you can call me, another time, and we can have this and do this kind of 15, 20 minutes. We offer that to just kind of figure out what your issues are. Okay? Awesome.
Great. I'll call
Thank you. I'm going to get off the call now unless there's anybody else who has one last quick question. Okay. Well, thank you so much again, and have a wonderful day. Give us a call if you need anything. I really appreciate the time. Bye-bye.